Hi, happy new year everybody. I hope that you all had a wonderful holiday season. But now we gotta jump back into it. We are now in book 3 of Covet. Now listen, look. I got the box set, you guys. I got the box set. Hey. This is what it looks like. All of the books in here, and we are currently dealing with the red one. Could you hear me back there? We're dealing with the red one right now. We are on Covet. Now, as you see, it's a thick boy. It's a big thickums. There's a lot that happened in this book. So much, in fact, that we kind of just have to deal with the important things. We have to deal with the things that need talking about, you know? I was gonna do a recap on book 2, which was Crush, and I can't because it's been a while. It's been a while, and I'm 2 books deep, and I gotta keep the information straight. So, you know, any recap that you need, just rewatch the entire video. Get caught up, get reacquainted. Yes, we back in it. All right, so Covet starts off so wild. Again, time is moving in this series, but it doesn't specify how much. So I have to assume that we are probably a week past where we left off in Crush, okay? We are at Xavier's funeral. Now, if y'all remember, Xavier was one of the werewolf boys that they was cool with. They did the Ludara's tournament with them. They won everything that they needed to win so that they could go handle the unkillable beast so that Grace can fulfill whatever she needed to fulfill, right? Well, he dies, and I'll also remind you that Xavier was Macy, Grace's cousin. That was her little whoop doo. You know, they was starting to cake a little bit. They was talking. They was, you know, but he gone now, so they're at the funeral, and she says that Macy has just changed as a person. You remember when we first met Macy? She was Miss Colorful, she was Miss Rainbow Hair, she was Miss Pinkie Pie. Everything was Pinkie Pie. She was just very sweet, very like SpongeBob, right? Well, now, honey, now she walking around like Gothica. She dyed her hair back to black, which I don't know if that's her original hair color or not, but she's on her goth mode right now, you know? She's dark, she's sullen, she's not giggling like she used to giggle, like she's just in a dark space because, you know, none of this is sparking joy. Now here's where I'm confused because it says several weeks passed, okay? And are we at the funeral? So several weeks have gone by before they officially buried this child. I can't imagine that. Or we start at the funeral and then several weeks pass, and either way, they ain't dealt with the mating bond situation yet. Oh yes, several weeks have gone by without Grace, Jackson, or Hudson talking about the new mating bond. They just been letting that permeate in the air. Again, these are teenagers, okay? And we have to just let them work in the time that they're working on, because that's something you gotta start talking about that day. I don't know, but they said several weeks went by before they even started to deal with it. So listen, this obviously means that the atmosphere is taut. Everything's awkward. You could probably cut it with a knife. Everything is just, it's so thick. Grace still caught herself being with Jackson, right? But she feels kind of bad about doing that in Hudson's face. Mind you, not bad enough to stop. Not bad enough to have everybody sit down and talk about and go through this very crucial thing. But bad enough to think about it to where when he walk in the room, she'll drop Jackson's hand, or maybe she'll scoot away a little bit so their shoulders aren't touching anymore or whatever. But Hudson peeps game. He knows what's going on. Hudson is trying his best to fit in with people. He's being very demure, you know. Everybody knows he is dad dude. He is dad boy. So talk to him nice, right? But it's awkward. It's awkward because, you know, everybody has the history of Hudson getting half of the school up out of here. Maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration, but they know this dude is a murderer, okay? They know he'll do it. quickly, efficiently. So nobody's trying to, like, you know, come at him for real, but nobody really wants to alienate him because they know now that he's not a bad dude, but the past is still there. It's murky waters, and again, they're not dealing with it. But Hudson is really trying to. So he's built kind of like a friendship outside of Jackson and Grace with their little friend group. So Luca, Macy, Eden, Chow with that man, Maggie, on and off Flint, because you know he killed Flint's brother. So Flint kind of, you know, who kind of feel a way about that. Understandable, but it's lukewarm. It's hot and it's cold, you know. But he still has like an established relationship with the crew outside of those two, right? So when he walks into the lunchroom and they over here caking a little bit and being a little bit awkward, he just go over here and he sit with the crew and they're going back and forth. They're sharing cake or whatever. I don't know. I think he bought Macy a piece of cake because he knows she like it or whatever. Listen, Macy is Team Hudson. Like, that's her boy. She was like, listen, I get it. I understand. I'm here with you. I see you. But it's Hudson for me. It's Hudson for me. So that's where she's at. That is who she would prefer Grace to be with. And so with the mating bond. Hello, Billet. We're getting ahead of ourselves. So everything is so awkward to the point to where Grace finally just decides that she has to deal with it somehow, because the tension between her and Jackson is fraught as well. And it gets to a point that they end up breaking up. They end up breaking up because the mating bond isn't there. The feelings isn't there, and she feels like she's starting to play in Hudson's face a little bit, but Jackson is the one that breaks up with her. Okay, because Jackson feels something going on inside himself, and on top of that, he doesn't want to do this to his brother anymore. He loves his brother, he do, and he can see the way that them two still trying to work it out and be together is affecting Hudson. So he was like, you know what, all of it's a chop. It's a wrap. Let's just call it what it is. We're dragging along a dead horse at this point. I love you, you know that, but we not together no more. She deals with that in an interesting way, by way of she doesn't tell anybody. He doesn't tell anybody, I guess. And they just kind of move along, and then people just kind of start finding out that they're not together anymore. It's whatever. But now Jackson seems a little feral. You know how Jackson was when we first met him in book 1, Crave, where people were just scared of him. He was just kind of like dark and gloomy and brooding and all that sort of thing. He's back to that, but like with the touch of I don't think Dudo's okay, and it's kind of like the breaking of the bond is affecting him more and or differently than it affected Grace. And there's a reason for this, and we will get into it. But at the end of the day, Jackson is kind of not safe. So now Grace is hell-bent on trying to fix that mating bond. She knows she's made it to Hudson or whatever, and she's like, listen, we'll break that bond, and then I'm gonna get back with Jackson because that's my love, that's my boy, that's where I'm at, that's who I want to be mated to. This is killing Hudson. I mean, absolutely destroying this man. But he's trying to keep like a brave face and not let it out, but he does end up snapping at Grace at one point, and he gets her together. And let's talk about it, because there comes a point where he was like, Grace, I understand the situation is messy. I understand that this is not how any of us would have wanted any of this to play out, but we have to deal with it. We have to talk about it. So at this point, she tells him that her and Jackson broke up or whatever. He's not worried about that. He's worried about the situation, the principle of it all, right? And he tells her, there is nothing that I wouldn't do for my brother. I don't want to hurt him. I do not want to be the cause for his pain, his heartbreak, his anguish. And I'm gonna tell it to you like this. You will never love my brother more than I do. I know him. I helped raise him to an extent. I was there. I've got 200 years on you with my brother. There is nothing that I wouldn't do for that man, but do not ask me to continue to put him before myself, because that's all I do. That's all I've ever done. Mind you. Okay, remember back in book 1 when Jackson killed Hudson? Turns out, whole time, Hudson let that happen. Because Jackson cannot actually go toe to toe with Hudson like that. It's not happening. David and Goliath, it's not terrible example. Hold on. What's a good example here? Yamcha versus like Brawley or something. Like, it's not happening. It's not baby. So what ended up happening is, you know how Hudson can dissolve everybody around him if he feels like it with a flick of the wrist? He did that to himself. So when Jackson went to go deliver the killing blow or whatever, Hudson dusted himself so that everybody could be like cool or whatever, and then he can get a break. He wasn't planning on coming back, but you know, then old girl did the ritual, whatever, and then it just set stuff into motion. I know. But he says all this. He said, I did all of this for my brother's sake, for his physical and mental and emotional well-being. Your love is not topping mine for this man, but Grace, you are killing me with all of these antics. And I'm sorry that the situation happened the way that it did, and I am sorry that my brother is broken up about it. But would I take it back and have you not be my mate because of it? No. And don't ask me to feel that way. Oh, he chewed her up. You guys. Had to be there. So at this point, she's still on some like, damn, like I really need to figure something out here, but at the end of the day, we're still breaking this bond because I want to be with your brother, Jackson. So I mean, it's just, it's fraud. So they decide to go to the bloodletter to get some answers, because they were like, we don't know what is going on, but I bet you if there's one person in this world that might know a little something, it's the bloodletter. And she originally invited Jackson to go too, but Jackson, he's a little indisposed, and he's got some other things going on, and he's kind of doing his own thing, right? He's not in a state of mind and or ability to go handle some serious stuff right now, right? So Grace and Hudson hit it over to the bloodletter. They get there, and then she starts to realize that Hudson and the bloodletter have very bad blood. Like, they do not get along at all. And the way that he's talking to her, like, he's talking like real spicy, like he real spicy with it and stuff, like this ain't that girl, like this ain't the bloodletter. So woo, this, that, and the third happened. She ends up putting him on ice, like freezes time a little bit, something like that, girl. And her and Grace have like a little one-to-one. This happens at some point during the visit, but what we really need to talk about, and Hudson does hear this part, okay, is that the bloodletter was approached by Grace's parents before she was born, and they asked her if she could help manifest a gargoyle, because they ain't had one in 1,000 years. They need to try to right the cycle because it's been broken, you know, things of that nature, and they're trying to get everything back on track. So they go to her and they make a deal. Can you help us get pregnant with a gargoyle baby? Bloodletter was like, bet, I'll see what I can do, hope for the best. But on the other side of this, if I do this for you, what you're gonna do for me is that gargoyle baby is going to have to be mated to my son, Jackson. Now, why do they do that? Well, Grace's parents just want to restart the cycle, right? Yeah. Oh, Grace's parents, not just human. And that's important. Later, we learn a little bit more of that in the 4th book or what have you. But yeah, they're also magical beings as well. Go figure. But the bloodletter said that even back then, Jackson was kind of, you know, dark, brooding child. And she was like, I'm gonna have to introduce something into this kid's life because he is just Edward Cullen type brooding, but he's a baby at this point. Mind you, the way that vampires age is that they age very slowly. So despite the fact that, and I think it's Hudson that's 200 years old and he's older than Jackson. So Jackson is just a little less than 200 years, right? Maybe he's like 180, maybe he's like 190, who knows? But they age very, very slowly. Okay, so he would have been an infant for like 10 years or something, right? And then like preteens and all of that and stuff. So he's at the age of 17 right now, 18, whatever. Even though he's over a century, going on 2 centuries, right? Just, I know, it's not the same as Twilight where he's 17 and he's been 17 for a while. They age like molasses. They move at the rate of a sloth. It's very slow over a long period of time. But they are the age that they are over this amount. I know. Okay, so basically she was saying with all of that in mind, Jackson was kind of a moody little scary kid, and she was like, he needs some love in his life. He needs something to balance himself back out because he's just got nothing going for him. There's just a void in his eyes. He doesn't feel anything. He doesn't care about anything. Nothing is moving this child. He's numb, and I just think having a mate to move through this thing called life with him would do him some good. That was her whole thing. So she manufactured the bond between Jackson and Grace. It was not real. And to prove the point more so, because Grace is like really like, I'm not sure I understand what's going on here. How can someone do that? Well, when she bonded with Hudson, their cord that she can see, their mating bond, is like this brilliant like cobalt blue, which is one color of the whole thing, right? It's just this beautiful cobalt blue situation. But her and Jackson's bond, I think it was green on top and black at the bottom, as if like someone took 2 separate cords and tied them together or whatever. And neither of them would have known that that's weird, that that's not how it's supposed to look. But Hudson knew. Hudson knew because he could see everything going on, and he saw her bond, and he was like, that's kind of strange. And then when he saw theirs, he was like, oh, even stranger, something was going on with that bond, to be sure. I don't really know how Hudson knew that something was up before we even got to this point, but you know, the story has to happen. So she admits that she went ahead and manufactured that bond, and that it could only take place because they agreed to it. So mind you, they weren't promised to each other. This wasn't like an arranged bonding, like an arranged marriage kind of situation. It was just set into motion. And then if both of them, Grace and Jackson, agreed to be in this mating bond together, then it would submit, then it would hold, and then it would act like your regular mating bond or whatever. So it wasn't that they were forced to be together, but everything was moving to put them into a situation to meet so that they could form a bond. And then they did accept the bond and wanted to be together. All that to say is Grace is pissed because she was like, you are playing with people's lives. You had me out here thinking that this was my one whole time. It was Hudson. Hudson's thinking a little bit deeper though, because he's the thinker of the group, right? And he was like, you have effectively messed with 4 people's lives. And Grace is like, well, who's the 4th person? Well, the 4th person would have been who Jackson's real mate is. And this makes Grace feel away, because she was like, oh my God, not only did I not consider that someone else is affected by this, because now Jackson has a chance to meet whoever his real mate would be and be with them, but also Jackson has an other mate that isn't me. So she has to kind of reconcile with that, right? Because that's her man's, that's who she wants to be with, despite the fact that she's bonded, very much bonded to Hudson. And so the idea of him, you know, picking up the pieces and being with someone else in general, and or his actual mate, kind of hurt a little bit. So they get all of this, and there's a whole bunch of rigmarole, honey. They go back and forth, they fight, and they angry, they yell, and they cuss, and they doing all this, whatever. But Grace decides, and by that I mean Hudson and the bloodletter. Grace decides to play it kind of cute because she is like, I might need her for something one day, and let me not just piss her all the way off right now, despite the fact that she's grimy, she's trash, she did this and she did that. They decide to not take this information back and tell Jackson because they were like, he cannot handle this information right now in the state that he's in, which I tend to, let's pause right there, let's put a pin in it. I tend to think that that is just incredibly grimy, because now you're making decisions for someone else on something that they have every right to know, because this affected him the same way that affected y'all. So to say, well, he's just not in a state of mind to handle this right now, and I want to keep it from him for as long as possible because I don't want him to hurt anymore than he's already hurting. Well, when he finds out and he knows that you know, I mean, it just feels like a betrayal. It just feels like he's an adult for the most part. I think he's 18. I think he's 18, and I think Hudson is like 20 or something. Which, if that's the case, if he's only 2 years old, so if Hudson is 200, then this guy's got to be like 198 or something like that, right? Listen. But it just feels like it's the least that the both of you could do is just put him up on game and say, boom, here's what it is, here's what happened. Because now you two, they realize that their bond is for real. Like, this is what it was always supposed to be. Like, this is for really for real right now. Okay, that is her mate, that is his mate. They go together the long way. So while yes, circumstantially it came together in the strangest way, and it usually never happens like this, this is the real bond, this is her real mate. So keeping that in mind, she's still very much need to break this bond though, because I want to be with Jackson. I know, it's great. I know. So Hudson is just defeated, but he said he's not going to try to change her mind, and what he's not going to do is make her choose me or him. He said it's always going to be up to her. He's never going to pressure her, whatever. He hopes in the depths of his soul that she would choose him, but if he doesn't, if this will help his brother, if this will save his brother from the darkness that's consuming him, then he's gonna go for it. Because at the end of the day, that nigga's struggling, and like it's not good. It's not good. It is not good. So at this point, they start asking like, what can they do to break the bond or whatever, and I forget how they get to this point. But they find out that they need to find the blacksmith, which is a giant. The giants in this world are usually the blacksmiths. They have different powers, like they make cauldrons and like other things, wands, anthems, whatever. This particular one made the shackles, and this is the one that made the shackles on the unkillable beast. She was like, you need to find that person, find the crown, something. I don't know if it was the bloodletter that told them this or if they figured it out somehow else, but that's the premise of this book. They need to find the giant that made the shackles for the unkillable beast, and they need to find the crown. Boom. Plot of the story. They get back to the school and they run into Jackson and them, and I don't know what happens. I don't remember what sets them off, but Jackson and Hudson get to boxing, and by boxing I mean Jackson is giving him the meanest two-piece. He's got him pinned up against the wall using his telekinesis. Hudson cannot breathe. It's looking dire. It's looking like, oh my God, he's about to get him out of here for real, for real. And his eyes, you guys, his eyes are just dark and soulless and blacker than usual, because I think he has dark eye color, right? But he's just looking real like he got a shadow over him. They're looking like, okay, Jax, I get you and Hudson beef. Y'all not cool. You not friends. You working on rebuilding your relationship to some degree. But this is OD, because I'm talking, he's giving him body shots. I mean, he's getting mink, mink, mink. I mean, he is tearing his ass up. Hudson is defenseless. Not by way of, because remember what we just talked about is that Jackson can't actually beat him for real, right? And that's if he's fighting fair. But Jackson is on some, I mean, he's using that telekinesis, he's cutting off his air supply, and like, it's just, it's you know? So now Grace jumps in and she's grabbing his face and she's like, Jackson, I'm here, it's gonna be okay, it's gonna be okay. And she's like trying to get through to him because they're all realizing at the same time, something's not right. Something is happening to this dude. So finally she breaks through to him. He lets Hudson go. Hudson falls and he's gasping for air and he's cussing him out. He's calling him this, that, and the third. And Grace is just telling him to like, okay, I get it, but chill out. Let me just talk to him for a second, whatever. And Jackson is like, I don't know what's happening, but I feel myself losing control. Keep that in mind. He cries on her shoulder and they all realize we have to do something. Ever since the bond broke, Jackson has been going downhill and he's telling you something's not right. I'm losing myself and it's harder and harder to come back. Oh, they go and talk to this one witch. Yeah, I forgot her name. And she's like the head honcho witch girl. Much in the same way that the bloodletter is, where she's also an ancient being. People kind of stay out of the way when it comes to her. And they go see her because they need to figure out how to find the giant. So they get there, they get to her island, and it's giving gingerbread man house. And they're kind of, everybody remembers the gingerbread man story, and they also know that they're living in a world of paranormal. So they were like, does this witch actually eat children? Like, it's but they find her, she looks normal. I guess her hair is just, she's got just a very nice dye job going on, I guess. And Macy like really perks up at that and she's like, good God, girl. Anyway, they all shuffle to go into the house and then Jackson goes to enter and she whoops around and she was like, absolutely not. Absolutely not. No soulless creatures in this little boat. Absolutely not. Get out. Go sit on the porch. You're not crossing this threshold. So Grace is like, well, he's not soulless. He's a vampire like Hudson. And the witch lady's like, outside. That should have been their cue. That should have been their cue. That a little something extra is going on with Hudson. No, not Hudson. Jackson. But they're never doing the thinking. But that's when it clicked for me. It was like, oh. Something's happening to his soul, because she said no soulless creatures can come into my house. He's been acting really feral lately. He said he's losing himself and it's harder to come back. But nobody's doing the thinking right now. So listen, they get into the house. They talk to the witch and she starts telling them a story about how there are two goddesses, and one is the goddess of chaos and one is the goddess of order, and that they created creatures. The goddess of order created humans and the goddess of chaos created paranormals, right? So that's everybody in this room right now. The witches, the gargoyles, the vampires, no, not the gargoyles, not them, but the vampires, the witches, the werewolves, the Selkies, the giants, everything else that is not human but is not an animal, right? Dragons, XYZ. Goddess of order didn't like the goddess of chaos's little creatures. She thought they were weird and creepy and she wanted to kill them all. The problem here is the goddess of chaos does like her little creatures and she's not understanding why you're being such a fucking hater. So now they start beefing and they're fighting each other and their creatures are fighting each other, right? And it's starting to throw things into imbalance, right? Chaos and order are supposed to be balanced, and it's not quite happening that way anymore. But what happens to one sister happens to the other sister, right? So I think the goddess of order decided to poison her sister to try to weaken her or something, or whatever. But because she did that, it weakened herself too. And now they have this whole little situation where their father stepped in and booted them out. Boom, y'all are acting the fuck up, get out of my house. And so now they're living on Earth with their creations. And he was like, y'all better figure it out, put your get along shirt on or something. And then once that happens, then you can come live back on Mount Olympus again or whatever. But until then, y'all acting up, messing up my house, spilling Kool-Aid everywhere, you gotta get out. So now they're doomed to live out the rest of their lives on Earth until they figure out peace, harmony, and balance, which the father decided to help them out a little bit and give them a leg up, is to create the gargoyles so that they can be the peace masters between the two worlds. And I know what you're thinking. This sounds like an entirely new plot to this series, where we were supposed to just be dealing with some sort of vampire gargoyle love triangle situation, and now we've introduced this entire different overarching plot. And that is why this book has such a fat ass, because now we're getting into entirely other things that is just taking the story and spinning it off to other things. But we continue. So she tells them all of that, and apparently that's like a folklore story that everybody grew up hearing, much like Mother Goose in the paranormal creature world. The only person that is not familiar with this story is Grace. So I'm sitting here thinking this lady's talking about herself, because everything about her seems to be other. Everything about her seems to be ethereal. She seems to be not quite like the others. And so I'm thinking this must be one of the goddesses in the story. She's either the goddess of chaos or order. I'm going to assume order, because she seems to run a pretty tight shift around her house, especially not letting soulless creatures crush the threshold, right? But nobody else is putting that together. It's just me, because I'm the only adult here that is doing the thinking. But I digress. So they ask her, how do we find the giant? And she said the giant is in the inescapable prison, which I cannot remember the name of right now, but it's a prison that you cannot escape from. And she knows that it is this way because she was one of the founders. She helped build it. There is one way to escape it though, because this is only book 3 and we have 3 more to go, and the story has to happen. So what she has them do is she has them take these flowers. There's these flowers and there's 3 of them, and she like imprints them on Grace's hand. And she was like, when you get in there, when it's time for you to leave, these flowers, you'll know how to get the flowers back out of your hand, and you will eat them and it'll make it seem like you're dead. And then they'll take you out of the prison and discard you to somewhere, and then you can leave. That's your get out free card. But I'm doing this favor for you, and so you have to do a favor for me. And everybody was telling Grace, this is a bad idea, just making deals with people and answering favors and stuff. And Grace is like, well, I don't have a choice. I have to go to this prison. We have to find the guy to get the unkillable beast free, because he's still in the cave. And so we have to do that, and I have to find the crown, and I have to do these things, and I have to restore the bond with Jackson, my baby boo, forever. So I'm just gonna blindly make a deal with this lady. But then she says, but the caveat here is it can't be to kill anybody or hurt any of my friends. And the lady thinks about it for about 2 seconds, and she's like, deal. And then Grace is like, cool. And then everybody else feels really bad about this because, again, just making deals with people is shoddy work. But Grace never 2 steps ahead. She's always about 3 steps behind. But I love her though. She's my girl. We sometimes our friends are stupid and we still love them. So then at some point we get to talking about Jackson and what that whole deal was with him being called soulless and him looking a lot more and acting a lot more feral these days. And that's because when was it called bitches? When he broke the bond like that forcibly, it fractured their souls. So what had happened was, you remember when Grace was talking about how she just feels so empty, like nothing is going on inside of her anymore. She is just utterly broken. It felt like her soul had been ripped out of her. Well, when that happened, it happened to the both of them. So they actually, their souls did get like fractured. I'm talking like, you remember in Harry Potter when Voldemort was splitting his soul to make the different Horcruxes? It was kind of like that. Like it fractured their soul. Like they're not whole beings anymore. But when Grace got the mating bond with Hudson and it like snapped into place, they explained it by Hudson's soul basically surrounding her fractured soul and putting the pieces back together so that she is a whole person again because his soul saved hers, right? But Jackson didn't have anybody to do that for him, so his soul is actually dying. And if that happens and it just dies all of the way, Jackson's not gonna die, but he is going to become a soulless creature. Yeah. And it's already happening, as we can see, the way that he just OD attacked his brother, and it's just kind of, everybody's very scared of him. It's very times of the essence. It's like, oh shit, we have to save Jackson now. And so now, what's her name? Grace is very like gung-ho about, we have to save Jackson. We have to break our bond, and then if I restore the bond with him, then, I can save his soul and then he'll be whole again. I know what you're thinking. Because then it's like, but if you do that, and then will Hudson's soul be fractured now because he doesn't want to break this bond, right? But and I wonder if that happened because their bond was broken unwillingly. And in this case, Jackson is in mortal danger at this point, and Hudson will not have his brother lose his soul just so that he may keep his mating bond intact with Grace. So he's already on board with, if there was any other way to save my brother, I would much rather do that. But if this is the only way, then I will concede into breaking the mating bond in order to save his life. Mind you, one party, Grace, wants to break the mating bond because she wants to be with Jackson. Hudson does not want to break their mating bond, but he will do so in order to save Jackson, right? So this isn't an even breaking where they both not want to be in this relationship, because he very much does, and she's very much confused. She doesn't really know which way she wants to lean, but now that Jackson is in actual mortal danger, she feels that she has no choice. And he's kind of being led in that direction too. Is like he's not just going to let his baby brother die.